I begin this sermon by asking for your prayers for me, for Pastor Will, and Pastor Sam. As ministers, we are charged with the spiritual care of the congregation, and right now, more than any time that I've witnessed, people are in crisis. And since we are also people, I ask that you keep us in prayer as we seek to help this flock move through the next 2 weeks. And as I was preparing the sermon, I have to confess that I was still caught up in the testimony and the sermon given last week by Reverend Michael Busey from Judson about his experience with the New Sanctuary Coalition and the way that he stands between Black and brown bodies and evil. And so my sermon today, this is the last time that I formally address you before the coming presidential election. I need to talk to you about what it means to be in a Black body at this time, what it means to be a Christian, a follower of Jesus in this time, 9 days before the next president is elected. You know, not to go down a Broadway musical rabbit hole, but Hamilton got it right. History has its eye on us. We have endured 4 years. We made it, but not everyone did. Over 200,000 Americans are gone. Some of them are our friends and family members. Next Sunday is All Souls Day, and we'll share memories and pictures of those that we have lost over the last year. And we know that based on the reports and the mapping that COVID is not through with us yet. But we are followers of the way, followers of Jesus. And we believe in the gospel, which is the good news. So where do we begin to find the good news as we look around at the chaos and the lies and the racism, at the hatred that is rolling across this country like amber waves of grain? Let's start with the passage that was just read, which contains what's called the Great Commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. And love your neighbor as yourself. I feel like love yourself very specifically is there too, because it's implied in the neighbor as yourself part. So by the time we get to Jesus saying this, by the time we get to Jesus telling the religious authorities that all the laws that they have spent all of their lives learning, interpreting, practicing, and enforcing, all of those things can be boiled down to 2 sentences. By the time we get here, Jesus has been wearing them out for a while. He's been giving them the business. And we tend to think of Pharisees and Sadducees as the same. I know I did. But they were different factions. They were all holders of the law and religious practices, but the Sadducees were a bit more elite. Both groups had different ideas about how the law should be applied, and they had different functions. They weren't always in agreement. But we're told that when the Pharisees heard that Jesus had shut down the Sadducees, the Pharisees got concerned. They had their differences, but on this, they were in agreement. Jesus was a threat to their authority. Jesus had been traveling and teaching and basically embarrassing them. He was not a religious official, yet he seemed to know a lot about the law, especially the spirit of the law. He taught with authority, and the crowds loved him. That was important. In the next chapter, he basically calls them hypocrites to their faces, these Pharisees and Sadducees. He tells the crowd, don't act like these guys, because they do not practice what they teach. And it feels as if these passages could be written for this time right now. We are a country that is built on freedom and justice, right? But if we look around, it seems as if those things are practiced in name only, or only for certain people. We heard last week from Reverend Michael Busey how injustice is happening right now in immigration detentions. We have watched, all of us, Black people killed on video. No one is held accountable. We know that children are being traumatized and abused at the border. We see laws dictating proper procedure for installing justices on the Supreme Court. We see those laws be circumvented. We see voter suppression happening blatant and rampant in real time. Is this the land of the free, the home of the brave? Do not do what they do because they do not practice what they preach. What does the law mean when it is a tool of injustice? Martin Luther King Jr. said that one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. Understand this. The law was and still is paramount to Jews. Their entire relationship with God is based on covenant, on agreement, bond, contract, promise, covenant with God. They were steeped in law. Jesus shows up and asks them to set what they know, what they've studied, what they've been sure of all their lives. He asks them to set it aside for just a moment, to push past what they've understood and reach for a simpler, more equitable, more loving understanding of the law. There is an illustration of what doctoral work actually does by a man named Matt Might. It's called the Illustrated Guide to a PhD. It's a drawn circle, which represents all knowledge. And then there's inside the circle just a little dot. That's what you know. And then the dot expands. Maybe you go and you get a master's degree, so you increase your knowledge. You become a specialized person, or that your knowledge becomes more specific. And then there's the PhD, and the PhD starts to bump up against the surface of this circle of knowledge that's contained by everyone. It's like a drop in the ocean that eventually pushes past the break line or the levee. These last 4 years, and especially the last 6 months, all of us have pushed past our edge of knowledge. There is more coming. We are on the cusp of something new. We are pushing just like a little bump against everything that we have known. And just like the crowds that were gathered at Jesus' feet, that pushed into the temple to hear him, that poured into towns and sat on the sides of mountains to hear him, we are desperate for something more, some new way of being that can take us to the next level, that can get us through the next 2 weeks, the next few months. Jesus encourages the religious leaders and us to push past what they know, what we know about law, and to reach for a simpler understanding of covenant. Love God, love yourself, love your neighbor. If only everyone followed this commandment. As I sit in this body, I am also a mother of a Black son who will be 16 in 11 days. And that alone is its own frightening reality. And I have to confess, I have never been more afraid for him than I am now. And that fear is also coupled with anger, righteous anger. All that we have endured, all that we are enduring now was optional, unnecessary. We could have not done any of this. America chose this for me and my son, to subject us to the most incompetent, partisan, delusional, lying administration that we have ever seen. You have to understand that when the person who was supposed to lead the country that you call home, this land of the free, this person who stands as the figurehead for America, who speaks for America, says things like football players are sons of bees, or that Black countries are S-hole countries, or calls the Black woman who is running for vice president a monster, or any of the other racist things that have been said. It lands differently on me It lands differently for me and my son. It is psychological and verbal abuse. There is harm done to me when someone talks this way from a position of authority. And yet, I still hear the voice of Jesus talking to the crowd back then and urging me to dig deeper into the vast amount of reserves that were deposited by my ancestors who survived in this country under worse circumstances. I hear the voice of my grandmother, Evelyn Whitelow, who never had much education, but who was determined that I would get as much as I could stand. I am reminded of my mother, who continues to survive unsurmountable odds over and over again. She continues to come out on top. And I see my son, soon to be 16, still filled with joy and laughter, who goes out into the world expecting to be loved and adored because that's all he's ever known. Jesus gives us the blueprint every time. When you are confronted with laws and red tape and people who do not have your best interest at heart, people who want to get you bogged down in rhetoric, speak plainly. Love God. Love yourself, love your neighbor. Care for the least of these, the people who are left behind, the widow, the orphan, the immigrant. Reach for the truth, fight for justice, and hold on. Fannie Lou Hamer said that sometimes it seems like to tell the truth today is to run the risk of being killed, but if I fall, I will fall 5 feet 4 inches forward in the fight for freedom. Reach, fall forward, 5 feet 3 inches, 6 feet 6'3", however tall you are, fall forward in the fight for justice. Reach, dig deeper, and reach down deep inside for that last scrap of strength. Dig deeper for the men of the Lucerne who desire and are worthy of the same dignity and the safety and shelter that we all want. Dig deeper for the residents of the Belle Claire who are working to make a better life for themselves. Reach and dig deeper for the children separated from their parents and loved ones at the border. Reach out and demand justice for immigrants who have a name and a life and who are being degraded on a daily basis here in New York City right now. Dig in and find what you need to fight on for everyone who wants life, liberty, and happiness, because all are worthy and all are beloved. My ancestors used to sing, "I've got a home over Jordan," or "Give me Jesus," because they had no hope of justice or fairness in this world. All they could do was keep going and trust that there was some peace after death. They trusted in future generations. They trusted in a greater sense of fairness and justice, eventually overtaking the people who dominated their lives, who made the rules, who dictated whether their lives would be hard. If you think the courts are stacked now, go back and look at the case of John Castor of 1655, when the courts ruled that a Black male indentured servant could be enslaved for life. We do not have the luxury of despair. We are people of God, disciples of Jesus. We follow the way. As a Black woman, I do not have the luxury of giving up. My ancestors, people who have gone on and people who are here with me now, have given me everything I need to reach. Our mandate is clear. First, love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. Those commandments are the foundation of love and justice. We are commanded to fight for a more equitable society. We are commanded to advocate for, and yes, vote for people and policies that give people the chance to be full participants in society, to be contributing members of the beloved community. as people of the way, we are called to care for our neighbors as we will care for ourselves, which means fair wages, access to healthcare, housing, and education, all the things that we want for ourselves and our loved ones. Scarcity, the idea that there isn't enough, or that if someone else gets some, I get less. Scarcity is a lie from the pit of Sheol. There is enough to go around. There is enough to do better. There is enough for us all. And we have to keep reaching, keep pushing for all of us. Even if all we get is just that little bump on the edge of a circle, we have to keep reaching. And if we fall forward. We reach, we love, we keep going. In Jesus' name and with his authority. And let the church say amen.